Chapter 1. The Silent Visitor. The night's stillness wrapped around us like a blanket. The wind outside howled in the distance, but it was a lonely sound, one that spoke of a world uninhabited, untouched. This planet was a graveyard for those who had come before, a desolate reminder of what had been lost, and yet, for the first time in a long while, it felt as if something had found its way into my life again. The alien woman, her violet skin shimmering faintly in the low light, stood just beyond the threshold of my door. The children, their small faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, clung to her, eyes wide, lips parted as they stared at me. They did not speak, their silence more powerful than any words they could have said. The weight of their gaze rested heavily on my chest, a reminder of the responsibility I was now tethered to. I knew, in that moment, that I had no choice but to accept their plea. The woman's presence was commanding, yet there was a vulnerability in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty beneath the surface. She didn't need to say more. The silence between us spoke volumes. She had come to me with a desperate request, one that carried the burden of her entire existence. It was a plea for survival, for a future she could no longer secure alone. And somehow, despite my isolation, despite my desire to remain a mere shadow in this forsaken world, I felt the stirrings of a need to help her. I don't know if I'm the right person for this, I muttered, almost to myself, as I watched her face soften in response. I'm just a mechanic. I fix broken machines, not families. Her smile was small, but it was there. Sometimes, the things we are meant to fix aren't the ones we expect. She took a small step forward, closing the distance between us. Her gaze held mine with a quiet intensity that sent a ripple through me, one I couldn't ignore. My children. They've known nothing but loss. I've watched them suffer, watched them grow weary of this world. They need stability, something that's been denied to them. And I need you, human. The weight of her words struck me like a hammer, and for a moment, I could only stand there, caught in the enormity of what she was asking. Could I truly offer her what she needed? Could I become the father figure her children were so desperately yearning for? The protector they had been denied by fate? Was I capable of such a responsibility? But before I could voice my doubt, one of the children, an older boy, perhaps 7 or 8, stepped forward. His features mirrored his mother's in a way that made my chest tighten. His eyes, deep and knowing for one so young, looked up at me with a silent plea that tore at the edges of my heart. His words, when they finally came, were quiet, almost drowned by the weight of the moment. Please, don't let her be alone. I looked at the child, then at the woman, and something inside me cracked. The walls I had so carefully built around myself for years, those walls that had kept me safe from everything I feared, began to crumble. This wasn't just about helping an alien widow and her children. It wasn't just about some fleeting moment of compassion. It was about something deeper, something that had always been buried beneath the surface of my own hardened heart. There was a part of me that recognized the loneliness in her eyes, the same loneliness that had gnawed at my own soul for far too long. I had spent so much time pushing people away, refusing to let anyone close, believing that I could face the universe alone. But standing before me now were 3 lives that depended on me, that needed me in ways I had never considered before. I'll help, I said, the words coming out more firmly than I expected. But I need to know what you're asking of me. This is more than just a roof over your heads. I can't promise you that everything will be easy. I'm not a family man, and I don't know how to be what you want me to be. The woman's expression softened further, her eyes gleaming with unshed tears. You don't need to promise me anything. Just be here. Be a part of their lives. They need someone who will stand by them, someone who will show them what it means to have a family, even if it's just for a while. Her voice trembled slightly at the end, betraying the raw emotion she had kept hidden behind that stoic facade. The desperation was there, just beneath the surface, and it called out to something deep within me, something I couldn't deny any longer. I stepped aside, allowing them to enter. The woman gave me a grateful smile, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. It was a fleeting thing, but it was enough to make me believe that I could be more than just a mechanic. Perhaps, for the first time in a long while, I could be something else, something important. As they entered the cabin, I closed the door behind them, the sound of it echoing through the small space. I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The beginning of something I could not have predicted. Something that would forever change the course of my life. And as I turned to face the family that had unexpectedly entered my world, I understood that the life I had carefully constructed for myself, one of solitude and silence, was about to be torn apart. Whether I was ready for it or not, I was now bound to these three souls in ways I could never have imagined. And somehow, despite the uncertainty that still gripped my heart, I knew that I could never turn back. I had just opened the door to something far greater than I could have ever anticipated. As they settled into the cabin, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt different now, not just with the presence of new bodies, but with a weight that I wasn't used to. The quiet, lonely existence I had built for myself now seemed small and fragile compared to the lives standing before me. I watched as the alien widow, whose name I still didn't know, tended to her children, whispering softly to them in a language unfamiliar to me, a melody that carried a deep sorrow in every syllable. The boy, who had spoken earlier, approached one of the battered chairs in the corner and sat down, his eyes studying everything in the room. He was a curious child, that much was clear. His gaze flickered between me and his mother, as if trying to assess the situation, trying to understand what had just transpired. The two younger children were more cautious. The smallest one, a girl no older than 4 or 5, clung to her mother's side, her tiny hand wrapped around her mother's cloak as she peered out shyly. Her brother, slightly older, seemed to be more interested in the strange surroundings, his eyes roving across the room, landing on my tools, the faded photographs on the walls, and the soft glow of the fire. I stood at the doorway for a moment longer, watching the scene unfold before me, unsure of how to proceed. What did I know about being a father? What did I know about raising children, especially those from another species? The weight of it was nearly suffocating. But then I heard her voice again, softer now, almost as if she was speaking to herself, but loud enough for me to hear. I don't know how much longer I can keep them safe, human. They've lost so much already. I don't know what will happen to them if they stay here. I moved to the table, trying to gather my thoughts, trying to think of something to say that might comfort her. I wasn't a father, but I could offer stability, at least. I could offer them a place to stay, a roof over their heads. It wasn't much, but it was all I could give. You're safe here, I said finally, my voice rough from disuse. You're not alone anymore. I'm not sure what I can do for you, but I'll try. I'll keep them safe. She nodded, her face etched with the lines of grief and exhaustion. But beneath that, there was something else, something that told me she had been carrying this burden alone for too long. I wasn't sure if I could carry it with her, but I couldn't turn her away. Not now. Not when she had so little left. I will warm your bed, human, she said again, her voice low and intimate. I have nothing else to offer, but I can be what you need. I know what it is like to live without a protector, without someone to share the burden. My children need a father, and I need someone too. The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, everything stopped. There was something heavy in her offer, something that went beyond the physical. It was a plea for connection, for safety, for a way to restore what had been broken. I didn't know if I could give her that, but I knew I could try. I nodded slowly, stepping forward. We'll figure it out, I said, though I had no idea how. We'll take it one day at a time. Chapter 2, The Price of Sanctuary. Days passed in a blur. The quiet of the desert, which had once been comforting in its solitude, now felt overwhelming in its silence. The woman whose name, I finally learned, was Sarissa kept to herself, often retreating into the shadows of the cabin, nursing her wounds, both physical and emotional. It was clear that the life she had lived before had been one of hardship, one that had stripped her of any joy she might have once had. Her eyes, while beautiful, were hollowed out by grief, and her shoulders bore the weight of a past that she couldn't escape. Her children were quieter than I expected, as though they too were lost in the enormity of their new reality. The oldest boy, whom I learned was called Kale, was a thoughtful child. He often asked me about the stars, about the ships I worked on, his curiosity boundless. His mother had told me that he was the last to understand what had happened to them, the last to truly comprehend that their lives had been upended forever. The younger ones, Lyra and Tara, were more in tune with their mother's moods. They often played together in the corner of the room, their laughter faint but sweet. It was clear they were trying to hold on to whatever innocence they had left, But even they couldn't escape the fact that they were now in a strange new world, far from the safety of their home. I threw myself into my work, focusing on the repairs that I had been ignoring for months. I fixed the machinery, polished the broken ships, and worked as though the physical labor would somehow erase the unease gnawing at the back of my mind. It wasn't just about being a protector, it was about being a father, a role that I had never imagined for myself. I couldn't give them the answers they sought, but I could offer them stability. I could give them a home, even if it wasn't much. One evening, after dinner, Cerisa approached me again, her expression hesitant. She hadn't said much since her initial plea, and I had begun to wonder if it had been a mistake to offer her anything more than shelter. "Can I speak with you, human?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. I nodded, setting down the wrench I had been holding. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I need to ask something of you," she said, looking down at the floor before meeting my gaze. "I know I don't have much to offer, but I want to try and make things right. I need to know if there is any chance for us to start over. For my children's sake. For my sake." The vulnerability in her voice was almost unbearable, and I found myself speechless. What did she expect from me? What could I offer her that wouldn't disappoint? But the sincerity in her eyes told me that this wasn't just about her. It was about all of them. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just a matter of physical needs. She was asking for something deeper, something that I couldn't ignore. "I'll do what I can," I said finally, my voice thick. "But this is going to take time. We'll have to learn how to live together, how to trust each other again." She smiled, though it was a small, sad thing. "That's all I ask." And so, we began our journey together. A mechanic, a widow, and 3 children. We didn't know where it would lead, but we were bound to find out, one step at a time. The days blurred into one another, their edges softened by the routine of survival. Every morning, I woke to the quiet sound of Cerisa stirring at the hearth, the fire crackling as she prepared something simple for breakfast. The children, despite their initial quiet, began to settle into the cabin's rhythm. Kale, the eldest, asked more questions about the ships I worked on, and slowly, he became an eager helper, learning how to patch up a broken fuel line or tighten a bolt. I didn't know how to teach a child to fix things, but he seemed to have a natural knack for it. It reminded me of the young me, always tinkering with engines and machines, never quite knowing what I was doing, but still doing it, because it felt like the right thing to do. Lyra and Taro, the younger ones, were more difficult to engage. Lyra, the youngest, would cling to her mother's side for hours, never venturing far, her eyes often darting nervously to me as though I might disappear the moment she looked away. Taro was a little more adventurous, though still cautious. He would wander outside, peering out into the vast, unforgiving desert, his small form looking so out of place against the endless expanse of sand and dust. But it was at night, when the weight of our new reality seemed heaviest. Once the fire was out and the children were asleep, Cerisa and I would sit by the embers, our conversations tentative at first, barely above whispers. She told me of her past, of her world, of the war that had ravaged her people and stolen everything she had known. She had lost her husband to that war, and her children had lost their father. She spoke of her travels across the stars, trying to escape the memories, trying to find a place where they could start over. The desperation in her voice was something I couldn't ignore, and every time she spoke of her lost home, of her people scattered across the galaxy, it was like listening to the echoes of my own past. I had lost so much too, in ways that still haunted me, but I had never known a loss like hers. I had never lost everything until now. One night, as we sat by the fire, her voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes distant as though she were lost in some faraway place. "I never wanted this for them," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I never wanted them to live like this, to be abandoned. They deserve more than this. They deserve a future." I watched her for a long moment, the shadows of the fire flickering across her face, highlighting the exhaustion that seemed to hang over her like a cloud. I had no answer for her. I couldn't give her back the life she had lost. I couldn't erase the pain in her voice, the fear that gripped her every time she looked at her children. But there was one thing I could offer. "You're not alone anymore," I said, my voice steady, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. "You and your children, you have a place here. I may not have all the answers, but I'll be here, for as long as you need." She looked up at me, her gaze soft but full of something deeper. Gratitude? Hope? Perhaps both. She didn't say anything for a long time, but the way she nodded, the way her shoulders relaxed just a little, spoke volumes. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all we could ask for. Chapter 3. The Burden of Protection. The weeks passed, and with them, a strange sense of normalcy began to take root. The cabin, once a quiet refuge from the galaxy's chaos, now felt like a home, however fragile it might be. It was not the grand life Cerisa had hoped for her children, nor was it the life I had imagined for myself, but it was a life we had to build together. Every day, we worked side by side, me, fixing the machines, and Cerisa, caring for the children, keeping the place tidy, and telling them stories of their distant homeworld. Kale, now more comfortable around me, began to share more than just his curiosity about engines. One afternoon, as we worked on an old transport ship, his voice came to me, breaking the silence between us. "Do you miss your family?" Kale asked, his young face serious as he handed me a tool. The question caught me off guard, and for a moment, I didn't know how to answer. It was a question I hadn't asked myself in years. I had buried the memories, buried the people I'd once cared for, all in the name of survival. But now, with these children in my life, with Cerisa's quiet plea weighing on me, the past seemed to creep back, trying to break through the walls I had carefully constructed. "I did," I finally said, my voice low. "I lost them a long time ago, Kale. But sometimes, I wonder what it would have been like if I hadn't left them behind. If I hadn't chosen this life." Kale's eyes softened, his young face full of understanding beyond his years. "But you're not alone now," he said. "You have us." It was a simple statement, but one that carried more weight than I was ready to admit. I looked at him, at the trust in his eyes, and something inside me stirred. I had promised to keep them safe, to help Cerisa. But what was I really offering them? Was I enough? Or was I simply trying to escape my own past by throwing myself into their future? The burden of protection began to settle over me, heavy and unrelenting. I had offered them shelter, a place to stay, but what else could I give? How could I be the father they needed when I wasn't even sure what kind of man I had become? The fear of failure, of being inadequate, gnawed at me every day. But I couldn't walk away from them. Not now. Not when they were depending on me. Cerisa saw the change in me before I did. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, she sat down beside me, her eyes searching mine as though trying to gauge my thoughts. "You're carrying too much," she said softly. "I can see it in your eyes. You don't have to do it all alone. You don't have to be their father overnight. Just be there for them. That's all they need." Her words were like a balm to a wound I hadn't even realized was open. I had been trying so hard to fill a role I didn't know how to play, to be someone I wasn't sure I could be. But Cerisa was right. I didn't need to be their father overnight. I didn't need to have all the answers. I just needed to be there. I looked at her then, really looked at her for the first time in days. The woman who had come to me, asking for help, for something she had lost. She had been carrying the burden of her children's survival alone for so long, and now, I understood. I wasn't just a mechanic. I wasn't just a stranger. I was a part of their lives now, for better or worse. And somehow, despite everything, that was enough. The days melded together in a quiet kind of rhythm. The sound of the wind outside became a constant companion, as did the soft hum of machines I repaired and maintained. Life was simpler now, but the complexities beneath the surface were never far away. I was no longer just a mechanic. In my mind, I had become the protector, the guardian of not only a family I never expected but also of a future that had seemed so distant just a short time ago. Kale continued to ask questions about the stars, about the ships, and about the world outside. His curiosity seemed insatiable, as if he were trying to understand a universe he had been too young to know before. I did my best to answer, sharing stories from my own travels, stories that seemed foreign to me now. In his eyes, I saw the same hunger for knowledge that had once driven me. And I saw hope, a hope that there was something more beyond the desolate desert planet we now called home. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple, Cerisa and I sat together by the fire. Her eyes were distant, but there was something different in them now, something that had softened over time. She no longer looked at me with the same desperation that had marked her when she first arrived. There was a quiet acceptance between us now, an understanding that this new life would require more than just survival. It would require healing. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "Do you ever think about what happens when they're older? What happens when I'm no longer around?" The question hit me like a cold wind. I hadn't thought much beyond the present. The future seemed too uncertain, too fragile to consider. But as I looked at her, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the firelight, I realized that I had been so focused on the here and now that I had neglected to think about what would come next. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice quieter than usual. "I haven't thought much about it. I suppose I don't know what happens when they grow up. I just know I have to do everything I can to make sure they're safe now. For as long as I can." Cerisa nodded, her gaze unwavering. "That's all any of us can do. Take it day by day." We sat in silence for a while, the crackling of the fire the only sound filling the air. The children were asleep, tucked into their small bedrolls in the corner, the exhaustion of the day weighing on their small frames. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel the weight of it all, the weight of being needed, the weight of responsibility. It was heavy, but not unbearable. Not anymore. Chapter 4, A New Beginning. The weeks turned into months, and as the seasons shifted, so did our lives. The children grew, as children do, becoming stronger, more confident with each passing day. Lyra, who had once been so fearful, began to play with the others, her laughter filling the cabin at times. Taro became more curious, often exploring the parts of the ship I hadn't gotten to yet, eager to learn and to help. Kale, ever the budding engineer, worked alongside me with a determination that reminded me of my younger self. Cerisa, too, began to heal. Her eyes no longer carried the same weight of grief. There were still moments when the pain of her past would flash across her face, but those moments were fewer now. She had become a part of this strange little family, and though she had not asked for this life, she had come to embrace it. We had made a home here, in this remote, desolate place, but it wasn't just the cabin or the land that made it a home, it was the bond we had formed. I had thought that being a father, or even a protector, was something I could never truly be. But in these months, with each day that passed, I found myself more and more in tune with the role I had never thought I would play. One day, while working on a malfunctioning thruster, Kale came up to me, holding something in his hands. His expression was serious, but there was a glint of pride in his eyes. "Look, I fixed it," he said, handing me the small part he had managed to repair on his own. It was a piece of a fuel pump, but to Kale, it was the world. I smiled and ruffled his hair. "You did great, Kale. You're really getting the hang of this." He beamed, and for a moment, I saw in him a glimpse of the man he might become. A protector, a builder, a person who would go on to do things far beyond this barren world. But that moment, fleeting as it was enough. Later that night, as I sat by the fire with Cerisa, watching the stars slowly light up the sky, she turned to me with a quiet smile. "I never thought it would be like this," she said softly. "I never imagined we'd find something real." I looked at her, at the family we had built, and felt something stir deep within me. It wasn't a grand thing, nothing that could be easily defined, but it was a sense of peace, of understanding that, no matter the struggles ahead, we had made it this far together. "We've made it," I said simply, "and we'll keep going, one day at a time." And with that, the future didn't seem so daunting. It wasn't certain, not by any means. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and pain. But there was also hope for the family we had become, and hope for what the future might bring. As I looked up at the stars, I realized that this was home. Not because it was perfect, but because it was ours,